Hey everyone, welcome to Building Astropad. I'm Matt here, and on today's episode, we've got Savannah back joining us. Hi, Savannah.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, so today's episode, we want to talk about some news out of WWDC. So WWDC happened, a couple weeks ago, and as always, that's when Apple announces a bunch of new features. Traditionally, it's when a lot of third-party developers get Sherlocked. So today we're talking about, based out of some announcements out of WWDC, did we get double Sherlocked? Because a couple of years ago, as if you've listened to this podcast at all, you're very well aware, we've talked about it to death really, is when we were initially Sherlocked by Sidecar. And then there came something out of WWDC that, to be honest, I didn't even notice at first during the WWDC keynote, but it does some functionality similar to what our Mac-to-Mac mode in Luna does. And what Mac-to-Mac mode does, it allows you to use another Mac as a display. And Apple's introduced something called Airplay to Mac. And so you can use it a number of different ways. You can AirPlay stuff from your phone to the Mac. But the thing that's relevant to us is you can use one Mac to AirPlay to another Mac and add it as a second display. And they even have a section in the system preferences where you can add another display through AirPlay. So it's pretty similar to what we're doing with Mac to Mac. And the question is, did we get double Sherlocked? Is this them adding stuff we're doing again? Like, what does this all mean? You've taken more of a look at it, Savannah. What did you find when you looked into it?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily, if we could say that it's inspired by Luna Display's Mac-to-Mac mode, but it certainly feels like there are a lot of similarities. Honestly, it seems like a feature that just makes sense for Macs. Like, it seems like a really useful feature. I mean, that's why so many of our users have loved Mac-to-Mac mode, because it just makes sense that you should be able to use a Mac as a second display for your other Mac. So, yeah, they mentioned this at WWDC, and it sort of, it didn't strike me right away as like, oh, we were just Sherlocked again. Like, it didn't really feel as blatant as the first time 2 years ago when Sidecar came out. Like, that was just a very obvious blow. Airplay to Mac seemed a little more understated, I guess, during the keynote. And I guess what we don't know about it is like overall performance, because it's not available yet in the macOS betas that are out. And so, right? Is that right?
No, actually Giovanni on our team has played with it.
Oh,
somehow
yeah.
He did get it to work.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like universal control isn't quite available.
Yeah. I think there are some limitations, and there was some stuff he couldn't get to quite work right with it.
So it's like we can't really make any assumptions about the performance because it's still in beta. And so hard to compare Luna versus Airplay to Mac. But I think two things have really stood out to me as an advantage that Luna has over Airplay. Two things: resolution and supported Mac models. Airplay to Mac only works with like pretty recent Mac models, like 2018, late 2018 and on. And so to me, it's like, who has an extra Mac laying around that's like a brand new Mac? Not many people. Not many people.
Why aren't you using that Mac? If you've got a Mac that's that new, why aren't you using it as your primary?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why people love Luna's Mac-to-Mac mode is like you can put your old Macs to use. Like, I have an old MacBook Air from like 2014 that I can use as a second display. And I think that's way more common, that you can put an old Mac to use. I don't know who is going to be using Airplay to Mac with new Mac models only. I guess that's just a very small market of people where it would be useful for. And then the other thing is resolution. Like, it's pretty limited. It only works with 1080p resolution. So again, Luna is full native resolution. And so I guess you could say that they're designed for different use cases.
Absolutely.
Perhaps.
That's what I was going to say too, because you can tell that the AirPlay stuff is really foremost meant for streaming video and audio, like movies and things from Apple Music. That's really what it's meant for. So it makes sense that it does 1080p because that's a standard movie format, right? It doesn't make as much sense for a second display, but that's what they have to work with.
Yeah. My initial thought after comparing the two is, if you're, for the people that are really looking for a true second display for their workflow using a Mac, Luna is still going to be a better option. Airplay to Mac is going to be a better option for people that are doing streaming, and it's not part of their everyday workflow, but they want that like seamless integration. And if you have a new Mac. So those are my initial thoughts. So how would we say we feel about this? Like, knowing what we know right now, like what are you feeling about the whole double Sherlocked?
Yeah, the first thing that I got to be honest about, this was originally a feature that Apple had in their iMacs called target display mode. So we it's kind of funny because they took it away from the iMacs and then we added it to Luna. So we were definitely inspired by an earlier feature, and now adding them back, it's like, well, it's not like we even really came up with the original. We were heavily inspired by Apple originally doing it as well too. So that feels a little different. It wasn't and it's different than what we're doing. It doesn't feel as blatant as what was going on with.
Yeah, it's funny because like after we were first Sherlocked with Sidecar, we released Mac to Mac mode as like a retaliation to that. Yeah. Like our sales were falling, and then we released Mac to Mac mode, and it gave us this huge boost and gave a new life to Luna. And then recently we added like Ethernet support and Thunderbolt support for it. And I saw someone on Twitter like referred to it as a reverse Sherlock. Like we were Sherlocking Apple's target display mode. And now it's like a reverse double Sherlock thing because they have Sherlocked it back with this new AirPlay to Mac feature. So I don't know. I guess how I'm feeling is that it doesn't really feel devastating. It's kind of just annoying. And it reiterates for me that I don't really want to be like have Apple on our heels all the time. Like it just reiterates that like moving to the Windows space is very important. And I'm really glad that we started that process 2 years ago and we aren't starting it now.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, even when we originally released Mac to Mac mode, we were half joking, half serious when we would say like, well, how long until Apple adds this? We thought they were going to add it to like Sidecar, but and that was like, half serious. This is not a total surprise to us now, right? And actually, since it's originally happened to me or happened to us as well, I've noticed just all over across the industry where this kind of thing happens. Like my eyes have been opened up to where you're on a platform and your platform provider starts to eat away at what third-party developers are doing. You see it on Amazon. Amazon and Apple are the two most egregious examples because they both sell on the marketplaces and they participate in it, so it's extra nasty. But you see it all over the place with lots of different companies. You see this kind of stuff even happening to the big companies. It's not quite a Sherlock, but like Microsoft just had an event this week, and Microsoft Teams has been competing with Slack. And at Microsoft's event, they talked about how they're integrating Teams directly into the operating system, into the Windows 11 operating system. And it's like, it's just the state of technology is moving so much and everyone's borrowing and copying ideas from others. It's kind of the nature of a little more the nature of the industry. What's different, our particular case with Apple that was particularly nasty, is just how blatant it was, and that also behind the scenes they were courting us and talking with us and extracting information with us, right?
Yeah, that's what made it so painful the first time.
Right.
This time around, yeah, it's like it was expected. I'm surprised they didn't do this sooner. And I think there's definitely room for both AirPlay to Mac and Luna Display's Mac to Mac mode. Like they serve different purposes. We can both compete in the same space. But
definitely. And we're going to have the cross-platform card to play too. Apple's going to do the stay within the Apple ecosystem, and we can start to do interesting things cross-platform, which is the whole reason, as you said earlier, we set out to be a cross-platform company, which was a major pivot for us 2 years ago. And this reaffirms what we're doing. It's like, yes, that was the right decision to break away from being just in the Apple ecosystem, and that to be a multi-platform company is what we needed to be in the future. The other thing is, we survived a situation that was much, like 100 times worse. And we're still here. And we're actually doing pretty well. All things considered, 2 years later, we're doing pretty well. And knowing that we can make it through that and seeing something that's more minor, that is less feature rich, not advertised heavily, I'm like, okay. That's fine. As you said,
shrug it off.
Room for, kind of shrug it off. There's room for both of us. We're going to do things they can't, and they're going to do things we can't. They're both going to have their place. And maybe there's just new areas we need to go deeper on.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, if we had to make predictions on how this will impact our sales, it's a lot easier to predict this time around because we have all of the data from when we got Sherlocked the first time, which actually we have that publicly published in a blog post. If you want to see,
we should link to that.
If you want to see what happened to our sales, in the aftermath of getting Sherlocked the first time, that first time around, like, our sales took a nosedive for a while, but they took like an immediate dip the first time we got Sherlocked when Sidecar was initially announced, but then they really fell later on that year when it was officially released in the macOS. That's when, like, our sales bottomed out. And so this time around, like, I could make a similar prediction, but it's kind of hard to say right now because our sales have been a little bit skewed by what's going on with the global microchip shortage.
Yeah, that's true. The chip shortage does skew it a bit. Although even when we have had inventory, it's kind of been an up and down situation for us with inventory on Luna. But even when we haven't really seen a major impact. Like, there was an immediate, very noticeable impact with when Sidecar came out versus this, nothing drastic.
Yeah. Nothing that we've noticed.
Nothing that we've noticed, yeah. And there was, compared to when Sidecar came out, I mean, that was just, there was no way you could have missed that. That was a major, major impact.
Yeah, and like referring back to the financial data that we published, with Sidecar, our Luna sales, they bottomed out at 13% of the pre-Sherlocking sales. And they hit that bottom like once macOS Catalina was released in the fall. And so from the time that Sidecar was announced to when it was released, it was just like falling. Yeah, this time around, I don't think there'll be anything as obvious. But thinking more like long term, it's hard to say if this will have like a long-term impact on Luna's Mac sales, but I would suspect that we're not even going to really notice it, or it's not going to be devastating for the company, because by the time Airplay to Mac comes out in the fall, we'll have Luna for Windows officially released. And the whole point of that has been to close the gap of the first time we were Sherlocked, close the gap and bring even more sales to Luna. So I'm not too worried about it.
I totally agree. I totally, completely agree. I think it's going to be, if it's a bump, it's going to be a bump we're not even really going to notice. One thing that's really in our favor here, as you mentioned earlier, Savannah, is that it only works on the latest Macs. So yes, that's more of an issue, a couple of years from now. But a couple of years from now, we'll be doing tons more stuff, right? We'll have added a ton more stuff. And even now, like, we have a ton of ideas of things we can do with Luna and our Astropad products too. We just don't have the people or the time to even do all the ideas we have that would further improve what we have over Airplay to Mac. We're going to get back to it more once we get Windows out there. Windows has been such a phenomenally large project for us. It's really required all hands on deck. But once we get past that, we can start to do some larger features again for the Mac. We've had some here and there. You mentioned Thunderbolt and Ethernet support recently for Luna, but we've got ideas for way bigger stuff. It's just been hard to do it. And knowing that Apple's actually pretty slow on a lot of this stuff, like it's 2 years later and there's not much new with Sidecar. We checked out the latest betas and there's like no changes really with Sidecar, right? So that gives us time to make things a lot better, to make a lot of improvements, new features, new ways of using Luna that I think will really differentiate us. And then the cross-platform thing is going to be so key, where that's going to be, people are going to see it. They're going to be like, oh, that's really cool. I wish I could do that with my PC, or I wish I could, use my Mac and PC together. Now, granted, we're not immediately releasing PC to Mac or PC to PC support, but it's on our roadmap in the future. We know it's something that people really want, and we eventually want to get to it. So the potential is just enormous. All the ideas we have for improving these things, I mean, I feel good about that once we start to put some of these new features and improvements in, it's really going to widen the gap that much more. So yeah. I agree. Long term, by the time it matters, we'll have done much bigger things.
Yeah. And the reason why Sidecar was so devastating a few years ago was that back then, like, our whole company revolved around the Apple ecosystem. And now we've really, I think, dug our way out of that and learned a really tough lesson through that. Like, never be totally reliant on one single platform. And we're just in such a better place today. So
the other thing that made Sidecar really painful was how integrated it was with the system, which is the same true for Airplay to Mac, but it wasn't so limited on which Macs and iPads it worked on. It worked on a lot more. And it was also part of a major marketing push. I mean, it was one of the top 3 features, I would say, for the Mac that year, if not the top feature, maybe the 1 or 2 top features for the Mac. So it had tremendous marketing push on it. I remember they sent out an email on it. It was all over their websites, versus there was a whole major section of the keynote dedicated to it when they announced it. Like, everybody knew about it, versus it's been much more understated and it's a lot more limited. They pulled out all the stops when they did Sidecar, and they made sure it was very, very capable, versus this Airplay to Mac thing kind of feels like an afterthought. It was not the primary purpose of it, but it's like a cool thing they can do. So there was that makes it a lot different for us. Not to mention what I mentioned earlier, where there was all the back channel stuff going on with Apple at the time, while at the same time they were building a competitor that was going on in the first time. This time around, we had no contact with them on the Airplay to Mac thing, right? So that also had a very different feel to it. But what are we up to now? What have you been working on with regards to Airplay to Mac, and how we're going to respond to it, if at all? What do you think, Savannah?
Yeah, so I think there are 3 main things that we're doing in response to Airplay to Mac. The first one, obviously, is just, as new betas come out of macOS Monterey, being able to test them and understand what Airplay's strengths and weaknesses are, so that we can lean into what Luna's strengths and weaknesses are in response to that. So just testing, being familiar with what's coming out later this year. But one thing that I've been working on is thinking about how Luna can take advantage of, SEO for Airplay to Mac. So we know that as soon as Airplay to Mac comes out this fall or later this year, people are probably going to start Googling things that have to do with the pain points of Airplay. So Airplay only works with new Macs. So I can see people Googling things like Airplay for old Macs, or how to change the resolution for Airplay, stuff like that. And I think that's a big opportunity for us to capture SEO, search traffic, and really sell Luna to those people who are frustrated with Airplay's limitations. And so I just this week put together a landing page comparing Luna and Airplay to Mac, and then I'll keep adding to it. And then hopefully, we can start getting some search traffic for that later this year once Airplay comes out. Yeah, and we can really carve out a space for Luna in the market there.
Definitely. So, I was using the metaphor that we're gonna surf on Apple's wake here, because once again, they have major marketing power. So as they come by and their boat leaves a wake, we're just gonna use that SEO that like you've been working on, Savannah, to just surf on it and play up the limitations in Airplay and how we could do a better job with Luna.
Yeah, and I don't feel bad about that, because Luna definitely has some advantages. So
and people are going to run into it and they're going to want a solution. And if we can provide a better solution, great.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the last big thing that we're doing, not in retaliation to Airplay, but just we're going to keep moving forward with it, is Windows development. I mean, that's been the plan ever since Sidecar. That's been our safe harbor from Apple. Absolutely. Pretty much. And so I'd say we're in the final stretch of that, right?
Definitely. We're in that last 10% of a project. It's always hard. That last 10% is hard, but we're there. It's making great progress. We've got the Project Blue out there. We have almost 20,000 people that have downloaded Project Blue and tried it, which is awesome. We've shipped over 4,000 Lunas out to Windows customers as part of our Kickstarter. So we're making progress. We're still in beta. We have Luna in beta. We have our Project Blue, which is eventually going to turn into full-fledged Astropad Studio, also in beta. We're making great progress, but it's a giant project and we're getting there. But as time goes on, it's more and more looking like the right decision.
Yeah. So to answer the initial question, were we double Sherlocked? You could call it the double reverse Sherlock. I don't know. Hard to say. But overall, I don't think we're too pressed about it, right?
No, we're not too beat up about it. This is very different than the first time around. And we're older and wiser, right? Mm-hmm. This is not... We know more what to do. Come to more expect it a little bit as well. And we're going to be all right. We're going to be all right. Mm-hmm. And it'll just push us to keep improving things and provide cross-platform. That's something that Apple's not going to do. Yeah, there's space for both, though. That's ultimately, if I would summarize it, there's going to be space for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
So any other closing thoughts, Savannah? Anything else we didn't cover?
Not really. I mean, the only other thing is, there are these antitrust hearings that are going on right now, big in the news for big tech monopolies. And so I think that sort of plays into all of this Sherlocking stuff. Are companies like Apple too powerful over third-party developers like us? So definitely something that we're keeping an eye on, and hopefully we can talk about it in an upcoming episode.
Yeah, we really should. There's been a lot of developments there, and things have been heating up. Things have been heating up in a big way, and you can tell Apple's feeling it. So we should definitely talk about that in the future. Many, many interesting developments, but for a future episode.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, that's pretty much where things are at with the Airplay to Mac and how we feel about it. And let us know what you think of the podcast as usual. Drop me an email, matt@astropad.com. Leave a review. Just let us know what you think, or if there's a topic in particular you want us to cover in the future. So thanks for coming on, Savannah. And until next time.
All right. See ya.
Bye-bye.